Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Legaltech Around the World. This is the series that is taking a look at what's happening in legal tech in a whole bunch of different regions around the world. We are landing today in the UK, and I'm sure going to have a fantastic discussion about what's happening in legal tech in the UK. Certainly lots to chat about. I'm going to shortly hand over to our facilitator and also our collaborator on this series, David Bushby from In Council. Hi, David. Good to see you.
G'day, Terry.
I'm going to disappear, but I will be lurking in the background, and I'm delighted to hand over to you, David.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to the third instalment of the Legaltech Around the World series, brought to you, of course, by the College of Law Centre for Legal Innovation. My name is David Bushby from legal technology consultancy / lawyer network In Council, and also publisher of the weekly Law Hackers newsletter. I'm your host for this series, and joining us today, we've got four fabulous panelists who are leading the charge in the UK legal tech market, which is, of course, our third stop on our Round the World tour for 2022. So with that said, I'd like to introduce firstly Isabel Parker, Executive Director at Digital Legal Exchange and former Chief Innovation Officer at Freshfields. Welcome, Isabel.
Thanks very much for welcoming me today.
No worries, and thanks for making it at 7 a.m. your time. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I guess you're all in that boat. But Giles Thompson as well is joining us, who is the Head of Growth at Avoca. Welcome, Giles.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Terry and David.
Next, we have Mark May, Practice Director for iCertis CLM at Psych. He's also founder of the Legal Technologist magazine. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, David. It's good to be here.
And finally, we have Nicholas Watson, who's founder and CEO at Ruby Datum, joining us in from Ibiza, actually.
Wow.
Thanks for having me.
So just to give us our audience a bit more context on where you guys sit in the UK legal tech ecosystem, can you each just give us your express elevator pitch on your organisations? And Nick, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So historically, we've been a virtual datering company, and we're still very much that. But over the past year or so, we've made quite a lot of adaptations to the platform for the evolving market. And we've essentially brought in task management and data management into the platform as a way to centralize your data when it comes to collaborating externally with clients. You may have seen in the news yesterday that we announced a partnership with Deal Closer. That will be the first of many, because we see our platform as a hub of data that integrates with lots of legal tech products in the ecosystem.
Okay, great. Mark, did you want to kick off with what you do?
Sure, I'll go through both of them, I guess. Psych first. So Psych is a legal tech consultancy based in the UK, but has people around the world. It's grown a lot in quite a short space of time, from I think about 15 people when I first joined it to about 160 that it is now, and continues to keep on growing, which is probably testament to the legal tech market as a whole. And then on the side, I guess I'd say I'm the founder of the Legal Technologist magazine, online magazine. And I've been doing that for 4 years now, and putting out hopefully interesting content for people. But yeah, that's me.
Very nice. Giles, you're the elevator pitch on Avoca.
Yeah, so I'm in charge of some sales and marketing activities of Avoca. What we do is document automation. So essentially helping people take a contract, designate the parts of that contract that need to be different every time they do a new edition of it, which then creates a form which anybody can fill out to draft a contract, whether they're a lawyer or not. And we also take people through to collaboration in a way that's a bit similar to Google Docs and negotiation as well, but with legal safeguards as well.
Brilliant. And finally, Isabel, your introduction, thanks.
Hello, I work at the Digital Legal Exchange, which is a not-for-profit organisation, and it works with corporate legal teams, so no law firms as yet, to help them accelerate their own digital transformations. But as a differentiator, we look for them to develop their their digital transformation hand in hand with the business. So we're not about legal tech and legal ops, although we recognize the critical importance of that to the overall enterprise transformation, but we look more at enterprise systems than legal tech individual solutions. So a slightly different perspective potentially than other panelists that you have here.
Okay, great. Isabel, we might stick with you for the first topic. It's the common question we have across each of the jurisdictions that we visit, just looking at headlines in the UK market for legal tech. What's catching your attention at the moment?
Yeah, so I think if we were going to summarize it in sort of 3 words, we'd say standards, data, and investment. The UK really is leading the charge in the push towards standardization. I think both to make operations and transactions easier to carry out across the whole ecosystem and to help with the development of legal tech solutions that are interoperable and easy to use. So as a couple examples of these, and I'm sure these will be well known to everybody watching, the first is One NDA, which is led by Electra Japonis and her team at TLB. And it's a free kind of open sourced standardized NDA that interestingly was developed through collaboration by a number of different law firms and a number of different legal teams. So a real genuine collaborative project. And that's another sort of theme perhaps that we're seeing in the UK. And One NDA has been wildly successful. It's been adopted across the board by a number of organizations. And it's now sort of expanding out into a larger collaborative project called Clause Stack, which is described as like GitHub for lawyers. So it's an opportunity for people to come together on one platform to collaborate, to run sort of standardization projects and develop templates into which others can input. So that's a really, really big push that I think is pretty much being led through the UK, although I'm sure there's work going on in other jurisdictions as well. And another example of that kind of effort is NOS Legal, spelled NOS Legal, which again is a not-for-profit taxonomy project, legal taxonomy project. So collaboration again between law firms and legal teams. The idea being to sort of classify the way legal work is delivered to make it easier to develop solutions that will sort of speak to all the common parts of a legal matter or transaction. And again, that's being led from the UK. So that's the kind of the taxonomy and standardization push. On the theme of legal data, Lawtech UK, which is a governmental backed body, has recently released their legal data vision, which again is a sort of non-for-profit mission-led aim to unite law firms and corporate legal teams around a view of how we can share data more effectively across the ecosystem, across the industry, to help people to collaborate better and to come together to develop solutions that benefit the end customer. So those are 3 big sort of areas that are being led primarily in the UK. The fourth area is funding, and we are seeing a very, very vibrant legal tech funding market out there. And I do have some stats. These are provided by you, David. I can sort of trot them off, but I may not be the best person to speak to them. For example, and I'll have to read these. Robin AI received 2.5 million funding in December. Ruby Data, we've just heard from Nick, has also received 195,000, I think it was in January. Juro, 23 million. That's a big one. Rain and Court, which continues to expand, which I think may be more of a US collaboration than the UK, received another funding round as well. And there are others too. So we can see that there is certainly a lot of confidence in the legal tech market. There's a lot of investment in the legal tech market, and it continues to be very vibrant here in the UK. So that would be the sort of general headlines from our region, unless others have anything else they want to add to that.
Just speaking from an investment perspective, one that caught my eye really recently was the establishment of it was a law student actually that launched a legal tech investment syndicate called Cataclysm Ventures, aimed at the early stage legal tech market. I thought that was quite interesting. That sort of thing I'm always on the lookout for, just specific funding for legal tech. So that was one thing that I noticed. Anyone else on the panel got some headlines they'd like to share that have caught their eye?
Yeah, I've got a couple of sort of friends of ours through Fuse. Definely, who are a great company who, among other things, make definition cross-referencing easier. They've raised, I think they've raised something like 3.4 million today. That was sort of towards the back end of last year that they last raised. Also Legaltech, which is a transaction management platform for managing conditions precedent as part of a deal. They've raised, again, I think it was 3 million in the summer last year. But yeah, they just feel particularly real to me and us because we used to sit next to them.
Nothing really for me, but the main reason for that is in the CLM space, there's quite a lot of consolidation, and the companies that I tend to work for don't tend to specifically be from the UK. They're kind of more global brands, but have bases tend to be in the US. But there is a lot going on for sure. Even from what I can see, what I see on my Twitter feeds, etc., I can see a lot's going on.
We've certainly noticed increase in activity as well from interest from investors or potential investors into our company, Ruby Datum. We obviously went down the crowdfunding route in January, but we are seeing VC companies approaching us far more regularly than they did before this year.
Nice one. Giles, I wanted to loop you into, I guess, this next broad topic. And again, it's one of these consistent questions we ask of all panelists for the different jurisdictions that we cover, just to give us a feel for the legal tech market in your part of the world. How many startups are there, and what are the main sort of actors? So peak bodies, events, incubators, etc. Can you just dive into, give us a feel for what the market looks like across the board?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. So the first thing to say is I can't tell you how many legal tech startups there are, definitively. First of all, there isn't the data, but part of the reason there isn't the data is because nobody can agree what that is. And that will be a bit of a theme of my answer when it comes to sort of the incubators and other spaces that people are occupying. Really blindingly obvious point to make, but it is an important one for those people who perhaps just don't have experience in the market. The UK as a legal services market is huge. My understanding it's the biggest in Europe. Close second is Germany from the last data that I've seen. In terms of investment in the market, we've already kind of covered it broadly. It looks like that. And in terms of the number of startups we're seeing, I don't know. In the last 2 years, I've seen a lot of anecdotal stuff. But a bit of a hot point, which is actually roughly when Avoca was founded, was sort of 2015, 2016, 2017. Actually, kind of interestingly, there was actually a bit of an initial drop-off after that, which will surprise a lot of people. But I'm not convinced that wasn't just people actually labeling themselves something different. Because actually when Avoca was founded back in 2015, 2016, we weren't even calling ourselves legal tech. We've just jumped on that particular bandwagon because people like to hear that you are legal tech. In terms of kind of where, I think there's a couple of other interesting stuff to talk, topics I can talk about here. So who's actually founding these businesses? In the UK, it does tend to be lawyers who are founding these businesses. Next, it's people with sort of legal and tech experience. And then actually before tech experience, it's most commonly business experience, which I think is quite shocking actually. Having generally, software businesses launched, by people who are, commercial before tech. In terms of kind of the key spaces where a lot of us are tending to kind of congregate, Avoca's been a part of, and I've been a part of a few. The one that we've been in the longest is Allen and Overy's Fuse Incubator, the Magic Circle law firm over here, and I think I'm right saying they are certainly one of the oldest incubators, accelerators of that kind, and they sort of have set the model. We also sort of been affiliated with Eagle Labs as well, which is run by Barclays. We actually got to the final round, having applied to Santander's program, which I think a lot of the people were based in the UK, but that was European-wide. Slaughter and May, another, slightly less internationalized, and deliberately so, Magic Circle law firm, they've launched Collaborate, and that's had some really successful startups coming out of it as well. There's clearly a bit of cross-pollination, including with the likes of MDR Labs, Mish Kondareya's labs, for those of you who don't know Mishcon de Rea, they did that that sort of constitutional case with Gina Miller with Article 50 when Brexit was happening. So you probably saw that one. You know, the other people who are sort of jumping on that particular bandwagon include the Big Four. So we've worked with Deloitte in the past, but I just got an email last week inviting applications to the KPMG program. I've also, you know, we've also been in discussions with PwC. And I think one thing to say is everybody takes a pretty different approach to these programs. Some of them, it is basically an exaggerated procurement exercise. Some of it is a genuine partnership. And actually with Alan and Overy, we've ended up creating a joint product with them and a third party called LMA Automate. And some of them, it's more of a kind of educational thing. You know, and some of it is a thinly veiled investment as well, but that can be really, really helpful if that's your first customer, if it's someone internationalized. Is there anyone I've missed? Yeah, I think actually the last one I wanted to mention, which kind of exemplifies my point around the blurring boundaries, is Lloyd Syndicate. So the really sort of famous insurance marketplace. They invited quite a few legal techs to apply to their sort of strictly, I suppose, insurtech incubator that they've just done. I think it's called Lloyd's Lab, imaginatively. They've taken on a lot of legal techs because effectively a lot of what they do is contracts. And actually what I've seen, at least anecdotally, is infused, we're getting a different mix. So we're getting a lot of people who are more focused, I guess, on fintech. So a lot of people are doing ESG and compliance and that kind of thing. So I think that gives everybody a little bit of an overview. In short, it's really exciting. And it's all happening so fast that no one's keeping decent track of it. Apart from Mark, maybe.
Could I add a little bit to that as well? Giles, you covered that so fantastically. One thing I've also seen as well is the UK government have led a few initiatives to various countries around the world, such as Austria, I think was one, Poland was one, South Africa, the Middle East, and they pick a cohort of legal tech companies and take them to various countries to pitch with potential clients at each of these countries. And also just we made it onto the Slaughter May Collaborate about a month or so, and I just want to say that their program as well has been absolutely fantastic, highly engaging.
I have to add to that. So we actually were part of Tech Nations, which is a government-sponsored, I guess, scheme. We're part of their legal tech sandbox, and actually it was awesome. They connected us with, basically everybody who's anyone in the government side of the legal services. So that includes the regulator, that includes the Ministry of Justice, that includes a lot of people who are writing the laws as well. And actually that's really helped us where we're sort of flirting with providing legal services or could be sued for providing legal services. Actually, that kind of reassurance and constructive engagement was really, really positive. So that's something that we've benefited from. And the other thing as well is I know that the question sort of covered events as well. So I mean, I won't sort of steal all the content for that one, but the UK has got an absolute, I hear that it's got a budding scene when it comes to actual sort of physical engagement and socializing. So Legal Geek is one of the key ones. And I think Legal Geek's gone international now, but it definitely rivals the likes of Clock and Legal Week in terms of enthusiasm. Anyway.
Yeah, I'd absolutely second that. I was there at the Legal Geeks first conference. I think it might have been in 2016, and at the time there's just no way you could have picked that was a room full of lawyers. The way that was done, it was brilliant. And I've got to say, just generally, because I did spend some time in the UK and immersed in the legal tech scene there, the amount of FOMO that I have having returned to Australia, and we've got action here, but I do look at what is happening across the board, where you guys are, from everything from the government support that you have to the number of law firms supporting the ecosystem, the events and publications as well, like some fantastic publications. And just generally as someone who looks for all the best content around the world. Like UK is definitely right up there, I think, alongside the US in terms of the support, the ecosystem, and the content that's coming out. So lots going on. Any other panelists?
One thing, David, just before you move on, one thing I will say on that is we also were part of Lander and Rogers Law Tech Hub in Australia. And I have to, they may well be watching this, but I thought I'd just mention that actually I'm definitely seeing signs of the same kind of model being rolled out in Australia really successfully. And we had some pretty constructive discussions about kind of what we've seen done well in the UK. So they're doing some stuff differently and originally, but definitely, I'm seeing it pollinate across the world as well.
Definitely.
And can I just add I don't want to be sort of a Cassandra here, but let me just add a little bit of a note of caution to all of this sort of energy and positivity, which is real and you can feel it. Often, even though there's a vibrant legal tech market, even though we have fantastic events, even though there's lots of investment, sometimes there's a feeling, and this is backed up by data, that the innovation that needs to happen isn't happening where it needs to. So for example, in the law firms, adoption is really still by a very small subset of the firm, perhaps an innovation team or a set of interested associates or the odd sort of sponsoring partner, rather than being properly atomized across the firm. So the Thomson Reuters State of the Legal Market report for this year had this sort of quadrant thing about popular and non-popular activities in law firms. And right at the top bit of the popular was all client-facing business development. And right at the bottom was innovation, tech implementation, new ways of working, diversity. So often, and I don't mean to be negative here, but I think we still have work to do in the UK to make sure that people are really focusing on why these things are important, why legal tech is important, changing ways of working is important, because it delivers a better outcome for the customer at the end of the day, and all the clients themselves are digitally transforming at speed. So I think although we should recognize all the successes, let's be aware there's still quite a lot of work to do here.
I think what Isabel said hit the nail on the head there. It's certainly been our experience. I mean, as a tech provider working with numerous law firms, we've been lucky enough to work with a few different legal technologists over the years, and they tend to transition from company to company. But I stay in touch with many of them, and what I've seen over the past year, especially with this whole trend of the Great Resignation and people realizing there is actually a better work-life balance outside of what they may have been doing previously. I've seen a lot of legal technologists move to either the Big Four or to start up their own initiative. That's why we're seeing such a surge of new startups over these past few months, because people aren't getting the movement they'd like to see within law firms. They're not getting the traction, and so they leave. So many I know have gone to like Deloitte, for example, for that very reason. I actually spoke with someone that was like head of innovation at a law firm recently, and they basically laughed when they said, "Oh, we've lost another one to in-house cancel." They promised them a better work-life balance, and they saw it as a bit of a joke, but it's not. It's a very real thing that many law firms are just ignoring.
I think I can mirror the sentiment here also. Before I was a consultant, I worked in a global law firm in an innovation document automation role, where I had to roll it out across the firm. But I think the challenges that I found was that there was a heavy focus on the things that they could sell to clients. This is the client-facing automation, and then what fell down the list was the time that it would take, the chargeable hours ultimately lost from making their own operations more efficient. And I found that quite a struggle, I'd say, because some of these teams, they're absolutely ripe for automation, but because they can continue to print money, probably not with a kind of mid to long-term view in mind, they just kind of rejected it, or just didn't give the necessary manpower to make it happen. And I guess from all of us here on this panel know, it isn't just a case of implementing the technology and and there you go, you've got your efficiency gains. There's the kind of, I'd say, boring preparatory steps for process, and looking at your templates and things like that happen before it, that need to be done, that lawyers perhaps aren't so interested in, and partners perhaps aren't so interested in their lawyers doing non-chargeable stuff.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting trend, that sort of that movement from some of the law firms where people are not perceiving or not getting the same traction as they want within that type of organization, and moving into other organizations or other models. But I guess on maybe the plus side is I do see an extraordinary number of, when I say extraordinary number, I think a good representation of law firms I find that seem to be doing some great things with legal tech products, etc. And some ones come to mind. So Simmons and Simmons have a kind of a menu of products that they offer out to market that is extraordinary. There's about 20 or 30 products there that they've got on offer, and link leaders as well. It's got through Nakota their Create IQ and others as well. And so from my perspective, looking into your market, there does seem to be some genuine, real fantastic results coming out of law firms.
Yeah, for sure. We should not be beating up on, or perceived to be beating up on, the law firms. There are plenty of law firms doing, interesting work, and Simmons is a great example. Remember, Simmons Wavelengths was an acquisition of a vibrant company, and it sort of bolted onto a law firm that was not a homegrown effort, although the way it's integrated has been very successful, and that they are doing great things. They're a fantastic team. So we don't want to be negative about law firms. It's great that people are focusing on client-facing product development. It's great that they're thinking about efficiency gains. The only reason we raise it is because there is something of a mismatch between energy in the market and what's actually happening on the ground. I do think it's important that we sort of recognize that.
Yeah, let's stick with the trends that we're into at the moment. There's key trends in the market. We'll continue on with that. Maybe Mark, I might throw to you on other key trends you're seeing.
Okay, so I guess in the role that I'm in at the moment, it's quite, well, it's not quite, it's very contract lifecycle management focused. So I suppose I only see the other parts through the work that I do for the magazine and the content that people produce. But for CLM in general, I'd say it's a boom market at the moment. A lot of people taking it up, not necessarily in the UK. I'd say the UK probably has a little way to go to really get on top of it, especially in light of the Thomson Reuters poll that I saw the other day, that I think only 7 or 8% or something of participants in that poll were using tech for contract management, which I feel is a little bit low. But overall, what I'm seeing is a lot of kind of enterprise customers, big business, that they're looking to kind of bring on these tools that they might already have one, and they're replacing it with a newer one, or they might be doing it for the first time. But ultimately, what they're looking at doing is bringing together all the contracts into a single point of contact for their whole business. They want to see the audit trails. They want to upload all their legacy documents that were there. I don't know, they could be on Google Drives, they could be on people's C drives if they're not so good, perhaps. But what I would say is there's definitely a drive to bring all these things together that were probably done by multiple applications, and they want to basically consolidate it into one CLM tool that a user anywhere in the business can go into. That they can see a contract, they can see the obligations in it, they can see the legacy ones that were there before, and I suppose ultimately they can create new ones and generate the documents from templates, and not necessarily legal team. It could be the sales team or your kind of end users. And I think this is kind of the way things seem to be going. I guess if I'd say a trend in CLM, it seems to be that big business, it wants to empower their their business users to create the agreements in the first place, and then legal actually just approves those documents rather than them being the team that actually creates them in the first place. And it makes sense. The legal team is a busy team. It tends to be seen as a bottleneck, and if they can focus on the good stuff that they're like the more complex stuff, I'd say, then it makes a lot more sense for the business. But I suppose overall, I see continued growth in CLM, and I'm sure will continue to grow over time, because I don't think we're at saturation yet. I don't think we're anywhere near it. And that's not just in the UK. I'd see that was a kind of more worldwide view also.
To what extent, Mark, do you see, I mean, CLM, I think, is one of the real high priorities for corporate legal teams. And again, it's not just UK, but certainly there's lots of examples of UK law departments who are undergoing significant digital transformation. That often starts with the CLM system because it holds so much data and so much potential to demonstrate value to the rest of the business in the way you've just described. To what extent do you see customers looking to bake that CLM sort of into part of a broader corporate legal workflow? So, you know, from matter intake to triage of work, you know, and making a sort of interoperable flow across the full sort of life cycle of the corporate legal team, or is it still very much a standalone product?
So okay, so I guess CLM implementation as a whole, I guess in organizations is quite a fairly, I would say a fairly long process, but one that's going to take kind of 4 months to a year, depending on the complexity of the business and the workflows and processes that they want to automate, and I suppose ultimately the documents and the complexity of the documents that they want to automate as well. So where I see it at the moment is that you kind of have to implement not an MVP, that's probably not what I'd call it, a pilot, I suppose, and then onwards with kind of building on top of it. So I guess at the point of where I come in, it's just CLM, but I suppose as and when people build on it, continue to build on it, they're building on it from both angles. I'd say they're building on it from the point of a user kind of needing a document in the first place, or determining which document that they need, and kind of using the CLM tool to request it. But there's kind of, I think the phrase legal front door is used, I think, a lot by Alistair. So a kind of a point of contact for users to kind of determine which document they need, or which advice they need, or what they need from legal, that kind of triage that happens before it. So I think those sort of things tend to come a little bit afterwards. I kind of implement that CLM first, kind of get people kind of using it and make sure that they kind of understand it and can use it well. And then after that, they kind of build out both ways. They add on more templates, they add on more workflows, more teams, and then on the other side, they add kind of other ways of getting to that point of request.
Yeah, a bit like the
I think
DMS.
that's a very good point.
Go ahead, sorry.
So go on, Isabel.
I was just going to observe that it's a bit like, you know, in a law firm, the DMS is the kind of the heart and the soul. That's where everything is sort of based. That's the central repository, and things sort of the tentacles come out from there. It's a similar approach. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, like, I think you hit on a very good point there, that legal tech implementation should be an incremental thing. And I think many firms maybe 2 or 3 years ago made the mistake of trying to buy a lot of legal tech all at once, and it just overwhelmed people. And the reason we are seeing such a drop in it now is because it was too overwhelming, and many law firms are very much going back to basics now and saying, okay, what do we have? How can we best use it? And how can we upskill our team to use the software that we already had before we then purchase new legal technology?
Yeah, I think Teams during lockdown had a massive impact on law firms. So suddenly thought, oh my goodness, they became alive to the possibilities of Office 365 as a platform. And I think lots are looking to leverage those capabilities before purchasing new technologies now, which is quite right. It's quite the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. The kind of bring back basic as the kind of one of the main themes I'm seeing. You know, the two biggest things I've seen, and they're not strictly just legal tech, but they are technologies that are used by lawyers. It is video conferencing and e-signature. I heard an anecdote that when e-signature was sorely needed during lockdown, that actually one of our partners, one of the key e-signature providers globally, just didn't have enough people to train people and to implement the tech. So people, swashbucklers just launched their own kind of implementation programs for it just to fill the gap. It was that crazy, but we're still not even that close to 100% adoption for e-signature. I mean, I did some conveyancing in my personal life, no whiff of e-signature at all. I think the other thing I'll also say on the CLM side is it's not being adopted by law firms in any wholesale way that I can see. That's partly because of the way that they interact with their clients. What we are seeing is, at least in my world anyway, and Mark, keen to hear what you're seeing, but we're seeing, client-driven projects. So one thing that I've seen loads of recently, and I think it kind of echoes actually some of the points that Cassandra over there was talking about earlier, in terms of stuff will only get driven or started when there is a client, when there's money to be made out of it, basically. So what we're seeing is client portals being created to basically retail documentation to clients, whether that's part of some subscription or retainer, or whether that is actually pay as you go in sort of a Rocket Lawyer, Legal Zoom style. So we're seeing whole new offerings being offered by law firms. And the reason I bring it up is because we're seeing that before. We're seeing that kind of CLM type functionality, which we offer as part of our product, actually adopted within those firms for their integral internal processes. We're seeing it for key point use cases. So for example, for loan transactions, we've got loads of people doing it. But for the run of the mill stuff, my view is the next stage in the process will be post the clients using it, and the clients will almost say, okay, we want to add you to this document, or we want to negotiate this with you. And that the lawyer's like, okay, well, I better. So that's how I see it going.
I think I totally agree with that. For me, there's a lot of CLM tools, but I haven't yet seen lawyers from their firms kind of be a user within that CLM tool, which would totally make sense, because then all that approval flow, I mean, you just be able to send your draft document to a particular lawyer within the system. I guess they have limited rights, perhaps. But
yeah, the one actually, and one other siloed way, Mark, as well. I don't know if you've seen this. I'd be really keen to understand is actually one of the things that was mentioned by Isabel earlier was sort of people don't want to change their ways of working. I mean, this is totally guesstimation, but actually, I think it's almost flipped on the head when it comes to in-house legal teams. They desperately want to change their ways of working because of their KPIs when it comes to cost saving, basically. I don't know how many, I mean, and I open up to more than just the mark, but I've seen quite a few specialist commercial teams within law firms interacting with their clients and using CLM type functionality where they're basically an outsourced counsel, where they're dispensing that kind of function. So, I'll just use a PeerPoint as an example, but it's that kind of where they've got that ALSP part of their business. I'm seeing them use CLM in that context, but maybe not elsewhere. I'd love to hear other people's experiences.
I think
that's the exact reason we're kind of evolving our platform to become a general document and data collaboration platform with external parties. Is because, as you said, like, I think lawyers are very much being seen as a bit of a outside counsel service.
I think just going back to the CLM point in law firms, I haven't seen it yet, or I haven't seen it well, yeah, in fact, I haven't seen it, I don't think, from what I remember. It's more kind of more niche document automation tools, I'd say, I've seen be used, because it's lawyers using it and they want kind of specific things out of it. I remember back when I was working in a law firm, I implemented something with a client, a big client, where they could create documents based on what the law firm template, the law firm had created for them, basically, which I found was quite kind of cutting edge, perhaps, at the time. Although I think Alan Overy had done it before, but that was good. That was good. But the team I was in, the team that I ran, it was kind of always seen as a value add. I can't stand the phrase value add. But I think over time, over the last 2 or 3 years, I think things have really changed. I think law firms have seen more value in this kind of legal tech consultancy and kind of helping their clients to modernize and kind of getting on board with it. But before that, it was just seen as something that the kind of document automation capabilities, which are something that were added to pitches and tenders as something that we can make it more efficient for you internally or externally. But now has value, which is good. And now I'm sure they charge out.
Mark, I wonder whether some of our attendees are screaming at us saying the reason it hasn't happened is because people aren't getting paid if they implement it. And one of the things I wonder is whether in the last sort of 3-4 years, actually law firms have actually got their sort of remuneration structures sorted when it comes to actually attributing that type of revenue. Because, you know, stickiness with a client over the long term, where perhaps divisions completely unrelated to you, well, you don't see the money for that necessarily in a traditional model. So, you know, I wonder whether our attendees are thinking about that too.
I was wondering, just stepping back a bit on the law firm versus its sort of in-house sectors, who's making the greater progress, do you think, on the transformation journey? Is it law firms or is it more in-house that are seemingly being more successful at the innovation transformation journey?
Can I take that initially? So when I was at the law firm I used to work with, there was a sort of sense that we were sort of doing the clients a favor, you know, all this sort of language like all clients are becoming more sophisticated and they need us to hold their hand and guide them through the legal tech world. And I really thought that was what the dynamic was. When I went and started working at the Exchange, working exclusively with large global multinational corporate legal teams who may not be representative, but still, I was absolutely staggered by the amount of innovation that's going on in-house. Wholesale enterprise digital transformation, which is being, because it has to happen, because they have a massive burning platform of pressure from their broader company, which is itself generally transforming, less money to throw around than law firms have. And corporate legal teams are under tremendous pressure to deliver value to the enterprise and to demonstrate that value. So there is a lot of innovation going on in-house at the moment. I've been speaking to GCs and COOs for legal who are starting to productize their own legal knowledge, you know, package it up, commercialize it, and sell it into the market to peer organizations, which I had no idea was going on. They're working in very, very different ways. Lots of them are working in an agile way, proper agile, capital A agile now, to support their agile businesses. They are developing their own digital legal front doors. They're commoditizing their knowledge and selling it on. That there's lots and lots of exciting innovation happening within corporate legal teams, I think, at a pace that we're not seeing in law firms at the moment, because law firms are very, very busy, actually, not their fault, and good for them. And also for the reasons we discussed a bit earlier, I don't think they sort of atomize that innovation effort effectively across the whole firm, because frankly, they haven't needed to, because they're all still making quite a lot of money. Other views welcome.
I think my personal view of the law firm versus in-house, at this point in time, I think that in-house are definitely going for it and making great strides. But I think for law firms, it kind of felt like during the last recession, like the 2008 to 11 recession, I think that's kind of when law firms like took it upon themselves to kind of look into technology a lot more, clients ultimately wanted more for less. They had to respond to that. So I guess at this point in time, I'd say that the law firms are a kind of a maturer market, perhaps. They've kind of tested the water a little bit more. I guess by now they've perhaps created their own incubator. But I think they're probably a little bit further down the line. They started off a little bit earlier. That's kind of my personal feel on it anyway.
I guess one thing I'd say on this is, I think, and it is the nature of the organization. I think where in-house teams need excellent leadership, where law firms can probably get away with a slightly less well communicated vision, is actually as between the different divisions. When I speak to different corporates, I see they have document automation solutions, for example, in 5 different areas of the business. And that might be procurement, that might be sales, that might be legal, whatever the specific business does, compliance, I don't know, even HR. And when you're going and selling a solution, the solution might be great for HR and great for lawyers. And it might require the HR to actually use it and the lawyers to implement it. So I think there's a lot of, I would say, brownfield when it comes to implementing legal technology in in-house teams, and where there's excellent leadership prepared to basically pee everybody off in order to get a one platform working across the whole firm and everybody working in a better way. I think they do struggle to sort of go beyond that. So I think there are those individuals at those firms. I think it is a bigger challenge to change everything and fully transform the whole business. But that's just partly because of their size and their international scope. I think to be fair, I actually think that there is more greenfield when it comes to law firms. But I'm encouraged, and actually I think, Mark, you're used to dealing with law firms which are perhaps sort of in these sort of upper echelons. I think in that, and I think that's who you're really referring to there. If we're talking about like the mid and the small end of the market, there's a lot of people who just haven't dabbled in it, or they've dabbled in it through using Practical Law or through using LexisNexis, sort of Fast Draft, Smart Draft, whatever they're called. And so actually taking them from 0 to 1's a bit easier because they don't have as many preconceived notions. But again, they're the same challenges with going from 0 to 1.
Could I just make one recommendation on a reading list for anybody listening who wants to get a view of what a really progressive corporate legal team, how they would approach a wholesale digital transformation? Bjarne Tellman, who's the GC of GSK Consumer Healthcare, which is about to spin off as its own company, he wrote a white paper called "Don't Let the Digital Tail Wag the Transformation Dog," freely available. It's like an academic white paper. It's really, really brilliant. Sets out his strategy for effective digital transformation, and also the sort of mistakes that you can make along the way. I can put it on the chat. I'll try and find it now. It's a really, really fabulous read, and really contextualizes how progressive corporate legal teams are approaching this. I don't think he's representative. He is a very progressive individual, but it's still a great read.
Yeah. Looked at it after we had a pre-briefing chat before today, Isabel. So you've inspired me.
Yeah, I second that as well. I saw that one and featured it in the newsletter about a month ago. It was a really good read, slightly alternative take on the transformation journey that we sort of expect with in-house. We had chatted on a prep call and talked a bit about cloud versus on-prem, and given you're all got sort of, I guess, most experience on the cloud side of things, how is the UK legal market sort of positioned in on that debate on cloud versus on-prem?
I think most law firms now have realised the benefits of cloud and looking to move to the cloud. We've certainly seen it from a vendor perspective. There's a lot of enthusiasm there that perhaps there wasn't enthusiasm for like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, let's compare it to the rest of the world, like a comparative analysis here. We've recently expanded into the US market. It's very rare in the US market anybody agrees to a cloud implementation. That is slowly changing, and we're actually, in a lot of these conversations, we're actually seeing the process for the InfoSec review change midway through the procurement process, which is really fun. But yeah, the UK has been a bit more, I guess, modern with it. I mean, I'm going to just tell an interesting anecdote on this. We often get the initial in the UK market, cloud's a bit more, risky. And obviously there's an academic argument to be had there. And we say, okay, well, okay, that might be your opinion, but, how does the client feel about it, ultimately? Or how do your key clients feel about it? They say, oh, well, they'll perceive it as a risk. And then we'll have separately been having a conversation with that particular person. They'll say, we only do cloud. Everything else is a complete waste of money, time, stress. And so obviously we don't, do that thing of asking mum and dad and then, playing them off each other. But yeah, I think that's an interesting insight as far as this is going. And actually, one of the things that we do is we say, okay, well, why don't we do a pilot program with the cloud version of the software? And there's going to be no private client data on there. It's just going to be dummy stuff. And then it's so rare that somebody goes from that cloud implementation and then goes to on-prem because they've seen how quick and easy it is with the cloud. So suddenly when it becomes real, how much less of a hassle it is, they don't want to go back.
I think the only resistance we're still seeing with that transformation tends to be from the IT managers that have been in their role for 20 or 30 years and are quite comfortable with the way they're doing things. But I've also seen a lot of them being sacked over the past year or two. So the change will happen regardless.
I think there is an increase in law firms from what I can perceive in the market. I'm slightly out of touch with what all the big law firms are doing now, but I think there's been a big shift. Quite a few have shifted to Office 365 in the cloud, and those that use iManage in the cloud as well. So that's surely a sort of a big change in attitude. I mean, to have your DMS effectively in the cloud is a really big shift from where we were even 5 years ago. So I do think there's traction in the law firm market from what I've been seeing.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to get slightly techie for 1 second, one big distinction we're seeing is, if you have an on-premise solution, from a security perspective, you can get a lot of those benefits from having your own cloud solution. So you have your own cloud servers that are completely segregated. Where I think the frontier now is convincing clients that actually not to have their own cloud, but to have a multi-tenanted cloud, which is obviously properly segregated from other people's data. But I have to say, I don't know the way that iManage do it, but I expect its own cloud. But I don't know. But I think that's where the frontier is. And I think it massively depends on what you're doing as well. We work with offshore law firms, and I think we actually were just speaking to one, and that they are thinking of going in on the cloud, multi-tenanted, which I was absolutely shocked by, but there's absolutely no reason why they wouldn't do that. But historically, it's all been on-prem. So even the people with the most sensitive data are going that way.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like as much of a challenge as it used to be in terms of the cloud debate. But speaking of challenges, I did want to ask this question around what you just generally think are the biggest challenges for the legal tech market in the UK. Nick, I might throw to you to kick this one off before we, just in the last 3 minutes, guys, we're starting to come to time, that's all.
Yeah, sure. I think there is still this underlying notion that inefficiencies, I'm talking about law firms in particular here, inefficiencies equals more billable hours. And, by being inefficient, you can essentially charge more for your time. And whilst we all know that's not the case, as client demands is surging, and we're seeing the desire for better efficiency increasing. I do think that many people can't let go of that kind of underlying notion, and that's a big obstacle.
I think just on that point, I think implementing technology, especially like yourself, Nick, with data rooms, you're obviously getting data quicker. You're getting the result that the client wants quicker. There's clearly value in that. beyond the kind of status quo versus what technology can provide, which ultimately can you can charge more for. I would hope, but I don't know whether law firms actually do that, or whether they just keep to the same rate regardless.
Charles, what challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I think talent is one of them. But actually, before I jump onto that, I'm going to mention, I think also like there's an element of promise fatigue as well. And we talked about one of the key themes being bring back basic. That's what people who are doing things well are doing. I think a lot of people have been burnt by legacy tools which overpromised and underdelivered, which is not something that other jurisdictions have in the same way. We see that day in, day out in conversations that we have. We say, oh, we're not interested in this category of technology because someone in this category of technology dumped us. So that's a big challenge. I think related to that as well is, that again, it's related to that same promise fatigue, but it's actually forward-looking promises. So, I'll have a conversation with someone and explain what we do. At the end of the conversation, go, that's really interesting. How does the AI work? And there's no AI in the core part of the platform. So I think that's a big part of it as well. But basically making sure that you position yourself in an honest way in the market, and you differentiate yourselves from the people of the past, but you also don't overpromise, because none of these solutions are end-to-end panaceas that are going to solve every element of the contracting process. It's just not realistic. So I think people are doing things simply and offering point solutions to point problems. Even if you are a toolkit where you can do loads of stuff, where they're offering use cases, I think are successful. But I think that's something, there's a lot of noise in the UK market, a lot of enthusiasm. So that is definitely a challenge for positioning. And actually, on the talent point, just finding people to actually do the jobs. Because of all this excitement, because of all this investment, there is more money flowing around in terms of to provide salaries than there is to necessarily provide revenue to these businesses. There is a mismatch there. A lot of people are not acknowledging it, but I think that's the case. So holding on to people, and actually when you're selling to someone, having the same client when you start selling to them as when you finish the implementation, at times, I would almost say that's rare. So that's a real challenge, both internally, but also in conversations externally.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And I think, just to pick up on Giles's point, one of the biggest challenges is people underestimating the amount of human effort involved in any kind of technology implementation. And the fact that if you want to have fantastic knowledge systems, for example, you have to start with having great knowledge assets, which is a human effort that cannot be avoided. And when you're looking at the total cost of ownership of a piece of technology for a business case, often that just gets completely and utterly overlooked. And again, I'm not on the iManage payroll, nor am I sort of on the reading list payroll, but there's a great article that Alex Smith did on LinkedIn the other day about how content is the most important element of a technology knowledge program. So you have to start with the very best content, and that's a human effort, and you cannot avoid that human effort. You have to take that into account when you're thinking about the technology you're going to apply. I urge everyone to look it up on LinkedIn. It's a really good piece.
Thanks very much, Isabel. With that, I might just throw to Terry. We are unfortunately out of time and couldn't get to any questions, but Terry, take it away.
On the segue of human effort, thank you very much, everyone, for your time today, David and Mark, Isabel, Giles, Nick. It's always great to see you, and particularly to hear. And I think we're finding this a bit of a fascinating journey, David, how there are similarities, but also, a lot of differences from one region to the next. So thank you very much for sharing your experience. Really, really appreciate that. I know that you folks are all on LinkedIn and that you're open to people approaching you and having chats with you outside, the box or the little boxes that we're all in here on Zoom. So folks, do reach out to people. And of course, that includes David, myself, in council, the centre. We would love to be in touch with you. And you'll find us on one social media haunt or the other, I imagine, but certainly LinkedIn is a good one to start with. We're going to be landing in Europe next in May on the 24th. So do tune in then if you would like that. And of course, you can catch the episodes that have gone before in other regions both on video and podcast again. So with all of that said, and again, huge thanks to you all. I think it's probably goodbye, right? Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks for having us.
David.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.